All right, so today it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Cynthia Parr. She's the Chief Data Officer for USDA's Research, Education, and Economics Mission Area, which includes ERS, NAS, NIFA, and Office of Chief Scientist, as well as ARS, the Agricultural Research Service, which is her home background. I got to know Dr. Parr when she was working at the libraries when I was in DC, and was really impressed by her vision of data science and especially open data. So she currently leads the USDA AI Center of Excellence and co-chairs the International Research Data Alliance, IGAD Community of Practice, including improving global agricultural data. Prior to joining USDA 10 years ago, Dr. Parr serves as the Chief Scientist of the Encyclopedia of Life at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of History. Dr. Parr received a BA in biology from Cornell University and a MS and PhD in biology from the University of Michigan. She was a postdoctoral fellow at Seoul National University in South Korea and held research positions in computer science at UMBC and the Human Computer Interaction Laboratory at the University of Maryland, College Park. Dr. Parr has authored over 60 scholarly works and organized 40 conferences, workshops, and symposia. She was the first woman to chair the Biodiversity Information Standards Organization, the Taxonomic Databases Working Group, and has served on the board of Earth Science Information Partners. So Dr. Parr is going to be talking to us today about cultivating opportunity, data science in the USDA Research, Education, and Economics Mission area. And I can continue to stall if you need.
Nope, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much, Seth. And good thing that introduction was fairly long because my battery almost went dead while we were standing here. So first of all, thanks so much for the invitation to be here. And I had originally intended to stay through the week so that I could attend that AI conference that Seth and others have organized, but unfortunately I have to leave right after this talk. So here I am. I've met with as many people as I possibly could today, but I would like to just say that consider this the opening of a conversation. I'm going to be covering a lot of ground in the talk today. I'm not going to have time to go into depth about much of any of it, but if you have questions, I'll do my best today to answer them, but I may also need to, come back and talk to people and come back to you with more questions further down the road. So I'm not specifically talking about artificial intelligence, although that will be one of the topics I talk about. I'm thinking about data science very broadly. So in USDA, we think about data as involving analysis, as well as data stewardship, as well as all the important roles that we have around data. So I'll talk a little bit about all of that. And I'm also not specifically talking about agriculture. I mean, I will talk about what we do at USDA, but I think my understanding is that this audience is not specifically ag related. So you may find, hopefully you'll find something that resonates with you regardless of what field you're in. I am a biologist by training, so I do think about this in terms of biological research data. But my current role has me working a lot with just general mission operations, which is a lot of HR, facilities, other ways of thinking about how to run an organization. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And we use data science for all of it. So my outline here is to give you some background to explain what is REE, what our mission is, what I think is special about us, and then I can provide a little bit of a baseline in terms of data. By the way, when I was a graduate student, one of my advisors said that if he didn't see a data slide within the first, 10 minutes of a talk, he was going to walk out. So I specifically added some data in the first section so that you can be convinced that there is some there. But in general, what I'm talking about is fairly conceptual. I'll talk about the challenges that we face, particularly around AI and generative AI. The executive orders and federal guidance that we're receiving, and then the challenges of this very rapidly changing marketplace in AI. And then I'm going to go through a long laundry list of things that we're doing at USDA that I think are helping to address some of these challenges. And that I will also just say that this is mostly the work of others. I can't take credit for most of this. I will focus more on some of the parts of USDA that I know better than others. But this is essentially, I don't want anybody to think I'm taking credit for all of this. Most of this I didn't do myself. Okay, so the landscape that we're talking about here. So Seth said it in the introduction, REE is essentially 4 big agencies: ARS, ERS, NAS, and NIFA, and the Office of the Chief Scientist. ARS is our in-house intramural research organization. You have location here on campus. I know there's some folks here who are ARS people. That's my home agency. Many of my examples will come from ARS because I'm more familiar with it. But I also work a lot with my colleagues in ERS and NAS. Those are 2 of the statistical agencies of the United States. So they are actually formal statistical agencies subject to a whole bunch of other laws around statistical data. We have arguments about whether statistical data is research data. It certainly gets used by researchers. Whether it is generated for the purposes of research or not is a question. NIFA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, does much, if not all, but most of the funding of university research, as well as state capacity building, such as Extension Service. And then the Office of the Chief Scientist is coordinating not just the science within all of our mission areas activities, but also the science that's done outside of our mission area. We actually have pockets of research all over USDA, and the Office of the Chief Scientist is responsible for doing a lot of that coordination. So I work a lot with them because, you know, my responsibilities are to all of these folks. And our mission in general is stated here. We want to create a safe, sustainable, competitive food and fiber system with strong communities, families, and youth through research, analysis, and education. And so I think I'll talk a bit about all of those things in this talk. But what makes us special? I mean, that's mission statements are sometimes very generic, and you know, what is it? We're all in favor of healthy communities and healthy people. But what is it that's different about what we do as a federal research organization? So one thing is that we have people within ARS and ERS and NAS who are going everywhere from, you know, small scale research on the ground, all the way up to using remote sensing data, all the way to economic research about the implications of all of this research. So we have within our one organization a lot of this. So it's similar to a university in the sense that we do have all these areas covered, although I would say there's a particular pressure to get our people working together and working with the people who then translate that research out to the public. Because we're government, we can do the short-term research that everybody does, but we can also think longer term. We've got federal employees who, I just met somebody this morning who's been with USDA for 52 years. And so if you think about our funding cycles, you know, when you set up an experiment, you could actually plan to do it long term. We can do that in a way that universities might sometimes have a difficult time doing. We work both locally and regionally and all the way national. I'm just showing some examples here. Everybody's heard of the plant hardiness zone map. This is something ARS does in collaboration with the university. And you can zoom in on that map, which is a national map. This is actually where I live in Vermont. And so you can see what the current growing zones are. And everybody uses this. This is, I would call this a data product. This is probably one of our flagship data products. And then this, I think, is from NAS Cropscape, showing the mosaic of fields and what's been planted in them. And we're not just national, we also have international research. So ARS has 5 locations where we have scientists actually doing work overseas, particularly for biological control. This is an infographic sort of explaining how important it is to actually do the research in the country of origin before things get to the US. And so there's a lot of work happening in France and Greece, a few in Argentina, some Australians, and even one scientist apparently in China, which I didn't know until I looked at this infographic. So this is particularly about biological control, and we have an Office of International Research Engagement that I'm starting to work a little bit more of to try to get a handle on what is the data being generated by this research, how do we share with our partners, but maybe keep the sensitive stuff out of the hands of bad actors internationally. It's a really big challenge. Okay, and then the last thing that makes us different is that we're public servants. We have to be stewards of taxpayer money. We're very dedicated. I think the people that I've met in USDA are without exception, you know, they're in it for the mission. And people understand that we're stewards of other people's resources. And we can take risks. In some ways, we can take risks more than others because we have pretty secure jobs. We don't have to worry about tenure. We don't have to worry about getting kicked out for wins, but we need to do it responsibly. This is the USDA Science and Research Strategy. And so this is something that the Office of the Chief Scientist put a lot of time and effort into. It was released just last year. And I'm focusing on this page because it was my pleasure that they actually pulled out data as a core part of that strategy. They understand how important it is for data to be available to make sure that our research is open and robust, and that it can be used to improve things like markets and trade, and also strengthening the links between our research and tech transfer. So I'm involved now in charting and capturing the progress along the various pieces of the science and research strategy that involve data. Okay, here's the baseline data. So in 2020, we did a workforce assessment across the entire USDA, and we particularly asked supervisors to respond. And we asked them a bunch of questions. And for each question, there were two parts to it. What is the highest level of existing competency you have in your area, what you supervise? And then the second part is, what do you wish you had? So the top bar in each of these charts is where we are now, and the second bar is where we would like to be. And they range from no experience in that red, dark red, over to the right here, dark blue is the most expert. And so the first question is about data visualization competencies. And I would say that the conclusion is that we wish we had a lot more competency in data visualization. I mean, researchers in particular, can make charts and graphs, but they're usually using Excel or something fairly simple, not anything fancy. Conducting quantitative analysis, this one does not surprise me at all. We're a research mission area, so clearly we have a lot of expertise. We do have a lot of in-house expertise already in analysis, but even there, we wish we had a little more in basic analysis skills. All right, and then the last question is about advanced analytics, so things like natural language processing, machine learning, AI, robotics, etc. And here, there's a really big gap. We really wish we had more expertise in this than we actually do. And so this was in 2020. It's been a few years. I do hope that we can do this kind of assessment again to see if we've made any progress. The last baseline I want to share is we did a data and analytics maturity assessment that Gartner walked us through. And I'm just going to show you a couple of overview things. This number here, 3, is out of 5. So we were considered as a mission area at a 3 out of 5. And if you benchmark us against other government organizations, the benchmark is 2. So we're already doing better than most government agencies, which again doesn't surprise me. We do research. We've always cared about data. It's not a new thing for us, but there's clearly a lot of room for growth. And the areas that and this is probably not something I can easily share. This is proprietary Gartner methodology here, but the dark things are things that we are particularly low maturity in. So things like sharing our data assets. We could be doing a lot better there. And then there's other functions here that are being highlighted to help us figure out what do we need to do. Okay, so our challenges. Big one is AI, of course, and I just pulled off the web a particular special issue in the Agronomy Journal. Basically, this is the cover story about that. Is it going to change agriculture? I think obviously the answer is yes. I pulled this off of a kind of alarmist blog, which was imagining robots everywhere. And then I saw that you actually have these robot arms in your greenhouses here. So it's not so far-fetched, right? That we would be using robots to do a lot of work in agriculture. So clearly AI is changing. Everybody knows, particularly with generative AI, that we've crossed into the next era. Now, generative AI has been scary to a lot of people. And this is a blog post about USDA that says we're taking a cautious approach. And that particularly came out because we had a memo back in October from Gary Washington, our Chief Information Officer, that basically banned the use of generative AI. This is interim guidance. So until we know more, you can't use generative AI. I was very pleased that we were able to negotiate a waiver for all research. So we can do research using it. We don't want to stop our innovative progress in research. Everybody else has to go and apply to get permission to use generative AI. We don't have to do it, but we do have to provide oversight over it. And we have to provide an inventory, not just of our Gen AI projects, but our AI projects. And I'll talk a little bit about that later in the talk. So we want to be cautious. And part of that is because there's a whole series of executive orders that we're subject to, starting with this one, which was back in 2020, about using trustworthy AI in the federal government. Then there was a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, which made sure that we're aware of and doing what we need to be doing about all these important things. Then there was another executive order, 14110, which came out last November, and which actually is requiring us to do a bunch of things. So we're busy trying to do all those things. And then finally, just a couple of weeks ago, the Office of Management and Budget issued this memorandum that basically spells out in a very detailed way, and we saw several drafts of this come through, so we knew what was coming, how to interpret all of this executive guidance. So we're busy trying to digest all of this and make sure that we're doing what we should be doing. But it does make it hard as a research organization. How do we do what we want to do without running into trouble because we've got other parts of the government saying, don't do this, don't do that? How can we possibly be nimble enough to keep up? And then the AI market is, of course, exploding. I spent a fair amount of time looking for a graphic on the web, and I found this one. This is from a particular venture capitalist. I don't even know what proportion of the actual marketplace this is, but it's clear, everybody's starting things up. There's lots of startups. How do you keep pace with those? As a federal agency, how do we even procure what we need to procure from all of these? How do we compete for talent when all these startups are hiring our best graduates of our programs? And the case is, and it's definitely the case that a lot of the products that we already use are starting to just embed the AI in there, and we may not even know what they're doing. And so how do we guard against that? So this is a fascinating time. Things are changing every day, every week. How do we keep up and continue to do the great research that we do? So here's where I'm going to go through some of the things that we're doing. How are we on time? Okay, great, got lots of time. Okay, so the first thing I'll talk about is that we have set up a system of data and analytics governance within USDA. And this was primarily kicked off by the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2018. So it required every big government agency to have a chief data officer. Actually, because USDA is so large, 100,000 employees, we have both a CDO and at the next level down, each mission area, and there's 8 mission areas, each mission area has an assistant chief data officer, and that's me. I'm one of 8. I've got colleagues in the other parts of USDA, and we actually have a pretty good relationship with each other so that anything that happens, we can instantly communicate with our colleagues in other parts of USDA. And because my mission area is so complex, and we like to tell people we're special, we're the most complex mission area. We've got more agencies, we've got more different subcultures within our agency. We've got both political heads of agencies as well as non-political heads of agencies. We've got lots of collaborations with our colleagues outside of the government. And so we're just a bit different. And so most of our agencies now have also set up their own governance boards. So I have a governance board for the mission area, but each agency is now starting to develop their own structure within their agency, and then I have to coordinate across those. We have a notion of data stewardship, which is a little new to the research space. We might think of those as data managers, but there's a little more to it than that. It's also who's accountable for data quality. Nobody wants to own that. They want to point fingers at somebody else. You know, oh, the people who collected it, they're the ones who should be making sure. Or what does it mean? Or who do you go to when somebody asks permission to use some data? So we're trying to work on this data stewardship framework across the entire USDA. Each mission area was required to set up a central analytics team. And primarily that's because we need to be basing our operations based on evidence, based on data. So I'll talk a bit about that. We set up some communities of practice, and then the department has set up some central infrastructure that we can use, such as an Informatica data catalog, a data lake with some associated analytical tools to try to streamline and centralize. But I will say we're not totally centralized, and for us in research, it's not typically the best place for our research data. The department just issued its new data strategy, and my mission area also has done its own data strategy that is designed to be very parallel, but to basically focus on the research angles that we know we want to work on. Okay, so remember that Gary Washington memo I mentioned, that you can't do generative AI unless you get permission to use it, unless you're in research. So this is the basis now of a generative AI review board, and there is a form that we can fill out, and I've now done this a couple times within my mission area. And then there's a group of people with representatives all across the organization, with the lead being the chief data officer, who happens to also be, in our case, the chief artificial intelligence officer. There's representation from the chief technology officer, the chief information security officer, general counsel, civil rights, equity, DEIA, and then mission area representatives. And right now, of course, REE is one of those mission area representatives, because we probably know a lot more about cutting edge AI than the other mission areas do. So this has been set up and it's been operating now for a couple of months. And even though we have a waiver for research, we don't have a waiver for non-research use of this technology. We've just gotten approval in the last couple of weeks to pilot test using Copilot for code. Many of you can already do this because you're in an environment where you can do it, but we have to be particularly careful. Part of the challenge with using these tools is that there's potential for malicious injection of code that could really compromise our government systems. And so we have to be particularly careful in how we do that. So we are going to be able to do that in a controlled environment to get started. So why do we have this review board? Other than the fact that we said we would do it, we need to make sure that we're being responsible and ethical, and make sure that we have representation from all those groups that are either affected by the use of this generative AI, such as civil rights and equity, but also from cybersecurity, so that we can identify and mitigate those risks. The use cases that are being reviewed will allow the department to figure out how to make sure that we can both find the barriers and do something about them. So basically, I think they're using these use cases almost as almost like focus groups. Like, this is what people want to do. How can we help them do it better? And then this will give us the confidence to scale all of this longer term. So that's the interim review board. Now I'm going to switch to a total. I mean, that was all about what we're doing to be responsible. And I should say, we've also been told that this is a board of yes. The idea is, how is that board going to make sure that we can do this responsibly? I'm going to switch now to talk a little bit about open science, which is kind of the opposite, where we're by default, things should be open. I am still based at the National Ag Library. That's where I was when I met Seth. Even though my position has changed, I'm still at the library, and the library is the lead on implementing and actually, to be honest, sort of creating these policies. But we now have in place rules that all people who are funded by federal research dollars need to make their data available, and they need to make the paper, the results, the scholarly article also available. And we set up infrastructure at the library to support that, and this is how you can search that information. So there's PubAg for our scholarly publications, and then the Ag Data Commons is a catalog and a repository. So you might find data there. There is a lot of data there to find, but there's also catalog entries that can tell you where to find the data, even if we don't have it. And this is a QR code that takes you to a basic information page about all of this. So this is part of open science. It's not all of open science. Open science also involves opening code up and making sure that everybody has good access to the skills and the resources that they need to actually do the science. But it's a big start. And then for those of you who are funded by USDA, this is where you would submit your manuscript, and it's the author manuscript that we want, not necessarily the copyrighted version that the publisher is releasing. And this is the Ag Data Commons, which is just migrated to Figshare. If you've ever worked with Figshare, it's the same underlying platform. And I bring this up largely because what excites me about all of this is now data that we can do cool stuff with. And because it's publicly available, anybody should be able to use it if they have the skills and the computational resources to be able to use it. So it's the start of another era. And what I'm trying to tell people is, yes, there's a little bit of a burden because you now have to do this stuff, which by the way is probably good practice anyway, because you don't want to lose your data and you want everybody else to be sure that your data is actually supporting your conclusions. But now there's all this free stuff out here that you can do really cool data science. Okay, now I'm going to say a little bit about SciNet. So the Agricultural Research Service also has some infrastructure. This is our high performance computing system. It's on premises. There's actually compute in Mississippi State and at Iowa State, and then a bunch of storage at the library in Maryland. And then each of our ARS locations, so we have, I don't know, something like 80 locations around the country, is little by little becoming connected through high-speed data transfers. So this is internet too, by the way. So we're providing a lot of infrastructure for our scientists and their collaborators. So anybody who's collaborating with us can also use these resources. And the data can be stored here. And the agency is starting to move towards, if it's data that the agency thinks is worth keeping, even if it can't be made public, we have a place for it. And Ag Data Commons will have access to some of the data there. So if you have really big data sets, we should be able to find a place to store that data. Okay. So now I'm shifting into the central analytics team that I mentioned. So when we set up the data governance framework and for the Evidence Act, and part of the Evidence Act was about evaluating our work to make sure that we're being good stewards of public money. And so what that requires is you have to have a team of data scientists to help make sure that you have ways to work with your data so you can make the decisions that you need to make. You may not be surprised to know that we do a lot of dashboards. This is a dashboard about our dashboards. So when I was, for example, I thought, we got to a point where we had 122 different projects and it got to be a little confusing. It's like, well, have we already started this? Has somebody already done this? We have multiple agencies. Maybe somebody's doing something here and somebody's doing something there. This bar are most of them are ARS. ARS provides most of the administrative services for the rest of the agency. So we have the most dashboards. But we have a lot of sort of mission area-wide dashboards. NIFA has a lot of their individual dashboards because they like to crunch the numbers for all their grantees. And we also retire some things. We've retired 37 things already. So we're trying to be, nimble and agile and try things out. And some of the dashboards actually are using machine learning models underneath them. So for example, we have had a goal that we need to spend 4% of our budgets on repairing our buildings. And so we have a dashboard that looks through all this expense data to tag, to identify purchases or services that have to do with repair to make sure that we're on target for that. And then there's a bunch of other things. I'm going to show an example of the project clustering in a minute. Okay, so ARS Office of National Programs was interested in using some advanced analytics to identify projects that were synergistic. They have about 800 projects that are going at any one time all across the country at these 80 different locations. And so it's not always clear, other than to a national program leader, who's doing what and who should be working together. And even a national program leader, they're responsible for so many projects. How do they keep tabs of all of this? So we took the descriptions of these projects from the project plans, and we did some NLP and pulled out important terms, had the system automatically cluster into a bunch of different groups. So each one of these is a project, and these are automatically clustered into different groups by the algorithms. These are the terms in each project, and up at the top is the top importance, the term that is the most important for each group. So you can sort of get a sense about what each of these circles actually is about. And then we were able to cluster all the projects in those groups to see which ones were actually similar, even if they were, and they were particularly interested in things that crossed the boundaries of what you would expect. So, you know, are there genomics projects that are funded under one program that are actually very similar to some other engineering project in some other part of the program? And I'm going to just see if this works. So this, you can highlight. So here's a cluster of projects here. They come out together in this similarity index. So what are they? So it filters, the dashboard filters it down. One of the groups is about citrus. The other group is about sugarcane. And the third group, the most important thing is viruses. But there's something about these projects, they're using similar techniques maybe, similar problems, and you can sort of look at the keywords to see what the similarities might be. And one of them, this is a particularly interesting group, I can tell from these project titles that they're actually from 1, 2, 3, 4 different programs within ARS. And so without this, you wouldn't necessarily know that they were related to each other. So this is what I call portfolio analysis, and this is what I'm hoping to do in the future with to help us do a good job. It's kind of the interface between it's researchy, but it's about our research and making sure that we do our mission as well as we possibly can. Another dashboard that our Office of the Chief Scientist put together was about pollinators, because we have special legislative authority to do a good job with pollinator science. And so they've analyzed, again, the portfolio of projects about pollinators to try to help get that landscape view about where are these projects, exactly what are they studying. And because I'm interested in biodiversity from my own research background, I got involved with this international effort to lead making all of this biodiversity data, particularly for plant pollinator interactions, to make it as standard as possible internationally so that it's all interoperable. So this is the kind of work that we're doing, and I hope we'll do more in the future. And then I'm also involved in the Ascend for Better Health initiative, the Agricultural Science Center of Excellence for Nutrition and Diet. And I'm responsible for putting together a roadmap for data for this. I'm not a nutrition expert. I'm relying on a lot of people who are, and we'll see where this goes. But we have a nutrition hub now that was announced in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with Southern University, and the idea is how can we better engage with communities to give them the research results that they need. And I'm also seeing it as an opportunity to train more folks in data science, because even if a particular college doesn't have a lot of resources to do lab work, as long as they have computing access, they can see all these free resources that we're able to provide and all that public access I talked about, and we just need to make sure that they have the skills to use it. Okay, speaking of centers of excellence, we have this AI Center of Excellence, which actually started within our mission area. So NAS and ARS together decided, you know, we really need a center of excellence. And it was kind of grassroots to start with. It was basically a bunch of really passionate people who decided they wanted to talk about AI. It quickly grew so that now we have people there from all parts of USDA. And I think of it as a think tank. So basically we have a lot of very enthusiastic people, and I helped to connect this relatively grassroots organization to the chief data officer, who is now our chief AI responsible officer. And so we are a really good go-to group for him to talk to as he's trying to figure out what should the department be doing, what resources does it need to provide for the rest of us. And so we put together some guidance pages so that all those executive orders and guidelines and everything, that we can make it easy for people to digest. We've got training resources, and we've got some community support teams for that. So workforce development is a big part of our strategy. We know, like I said, it's going to be hard to recruit people. We can't offer the kind of money that we know that they could get out in industry. We can potentially entice them because we have a great mission, and I think we will get some people that way. But a big part of our strategic plan will be to make sure that our folks have the skills that they need. But there's both. So in our mission area, we're not going to hire somebody who just does AI. We'll hire people who have AI and statistics or economics or microbiology or something like that. So we're not going to be hiring very many people who are just data scientists. We'll be hiring people who have the domain expertise and the AI expertise. And in the meantime, we are also working to develop the skills of the people that we already have. So we've put together this page to provide learning pathways and ways to certify that people have done these learning pathways. And we've even got a concierge service. I don't know if anybody's used it yet, but it's a big landscape out there. If somebody came to us and said, I don't know where to start, or this is what I hope to do, we'll help find the right resources. We've put together learning pathways for AI, Power BI, Python, R, Tableau. We know we have a bunch of people still using SAS, so we could put that together. And then the big one, I think, is data stewardship. That's the one where we don't have a lot of formal training for that. There's a lot of people doing it, but not with any formal training. We are also working on making sure people can use Tableau to visualize their data. And so we have run several cohorts where people in a small group will go through a training together and work on a project that is significant to them. So most of the people that so far that we've been working with are on the administrative side. These are people who are actually working in HR or in facilities, and we want them to have the skills so they can do this for themselves rather than relying on our central team. And so these are some examples of some of the projects that they've done. So for example, an ARS injury and illness summary. I'm happy to say we've had no fatalities in 2022. I think that's what that means. But the idea here is these are the folks who know the data. They work with it every day. If they also have the skills to build dashboards, then those dashboards will really meet their needs. And these are a couple of things that are coming up that the department is offering. So we have an innovation symposium that's happening this summer that I think is going to talk a lot about the AI work that's happening. And then we also have associated with that, not too long afterwards, a challenge that's going to go out to employees of USDA that are using robotic process automation. So we have available to us a tool that anybody can use as citizen developers to automate some of the tedious work that we do. And so there'll be a challenge that they issue in August to give folks an opportunity to play around with that. Okay, SciNet is also providing resources. So they have a lot of online tutorials and guides. Here's a couple of them, one for bioinformatics. Whoops, went too fast, go back. Bioinformatics and geospatial data are some big areas of research in ARS. So they've got some specialized tutorials to help folks with those. And then they're also hiring a lot of postdocs. So I raise that because some of you in this room might be interested in postdocs like that. How many people here are NSF funded? You know, and then how many people are USDA funded? So it's a little bit of both. So NSF, as part of that executive order of 14110, was required to launch a pilot for the National AI Research Resource. And that was launched in January. they've been talking about it for quite some time, but the executive order sort of made it happen immediately. And they pulled together a bunch of partners across the government and also from industry and other partners. And this pilot will provide infrastructure. So for example, they're going to have allocations on some of the big supercomputers that are available from DOE and NSF. They're not providing funding to actually do the research. Maybe they'll get there down the road. And NAS has decided to participate, and so we can now say USDA is part of this, and what they're offering is data. Basically, we have huge amounts of data, and we want the NAIR community to start using that data. I put down here at the bottom, the vision is that NAIR Open will have a lot of the open data assets. NAIR Secure will be for about computing with the more sensitive stuff. NAIR software will be helping to better manage the coding and other programmatic activities that you need when you do AI, and then NAIR Classroom will have the training resources. So this is just hot off the presses. It's really only been the last few months that this has been a thing. Also hot off the presses, last week at the National Ag Library, we had a symposium called Navigating the Future AI Applications and Research Laboratories. And so this is Kate Nyhan from Yale. We also had Diane Babsky from the National Library of Medicine. And then we also had an academic who's working with ARS on data archiving. And we talked about the role of libraries in supporting this AI future. Okay, can't finish a talk without explaining what's going on at NIFA. NIFA is funding data science through its AFRI program, and because of course we're not doing core AI research ourselves in agriculture, mostly we're applying these techniques. These projects need to be grounded both in agricultural science and in data science. So there's the information on this. I gather that the deadlines are, things have to be in by the end of December, so there's plenty of time to, what's that? Oh, okay. Almost done. And this is a list of projects so far that when I asked NIFA, what are you doing, what are you funding with respect to training, workforce development? Because of course, there's developing our own workforce at USDA, but we also want there to be a good pipeline, not just for us, but also for the ag industry. And there are a bunch of different projects that already have some aspect of AI and data related training, and they're listed here. Okay, and this is the last thing I'm going to mention, that inventory that I said Gary Washington was requiring us to do of our AI related projects. It's due tomorrow. I don't have results to share with you yet because we're still finalizing this, but I can tell you that so far I know about 160 projects that are using AI. Now, interestingly, NIFA told me, you might just assume that every NIFA funded project is using AI because it's becoming so pervasive that maybe everything is, but that's not, in my mind, that's not very useful. So what I'm looking for with this inventory is how can we tag these projects so that we can answer questions like how many projects are actually using natural language processing? Not so many, actually. Most of them are not. Most of them are using standard predictive modeling techniques or machine learning. We're starting with our in-house research first, but we are expected to go out and look at those university projects that we support. And I see this as another baseline. We need to know where we are now, and we need to think about what synergies we can identify, how we can connect people up, what do we need to provide for these people, and are any of our efforts improving things? Okay, so the take-home message is that basically, yeah, there are a lot of challenges. Things are moving really fast. It's hard to keep up. It's hard to compete with industry. But we are pretty agile in our mission area, I think more so than maybe other parts of USDA, because we're used to fast-moving research. That's just what research does. We can build on our strengths. We're not going to do everything. We're not going to necessarily, we're not going to create foundational new algorithms, but we will come up with some really important applications of those algorithms, and we can basically also use it to help our operations be as effective as possible. And what I hope I'm leaving you with is the idea that there's many ways that you could get involved in this, depending on where you are and what your career path is. We will be obviously continuing to hire researchers, and we'll increasingly want researchers with data science skills. Obviously, we're open to partnering on projects. Seth and I keep trying to work together and haven't yet gotten funded to do that, but at the National Ag Library, I really technically should be partnering with everybody because we need to make sure that that info is in our library. And then finally, because a lot of our data science is not even for the research itself, but for the management of the research, we are going to need people helping us with that, whether they're working as program analysts or data scientists or contractors that we work with. There's plenty of opportunity. All right, and then I'll just end with this list of the people that I could think of that helped contribute to this talk. And I'm probably forgetting a lot of people. So, okay, that's all I have.